I had a tough day already. My old car had been acting up, and I knew something was wrong. It was making strange noises, and the engine seemed to sputter every time I hit the gas pedal. I had no choice but to take it to a mechanic. I drove down to the small shop on the corner, hoping they'd be able to fix it quickly. The place looked a little run down, but I figured they must know what they're doing, right? I walked in, and a man was working on a car in the back. He looked up when I entered and wiped his hands on a rag. "How can I help you?" he asked, his voice a bit gruff, like he wasn't too thrilled about having a customer. I told him my car was making a weird noise, and I needed him to take a look at it. I had barely finished explaining when he scoffed. "Lady, this old thing? It's not worth fixing. You should just save your money and buy a new one." I was taken aback. "What do you mean? It's running fine, just a little rough. Can you at least take a look at it?" He crossed his arms and leaned against the counter, clearly unimpressed with me. "Listen, I don't think you understand. It's not going to be worth the cost of the repairs. If I were you, I'd just sell it for scrap and move on." His tone was condescending, and I felt my cheeks heat up with frustration. I didn't want to argue, but I was offended by the way he spoke to me, like I didn't know anything about cars. "Well," I said, trying to keep my calm, "maybe you could just check it out anyway, and we'll go from there?" He shook his head. "Not worth my time, sorry." I stood there for a moment, feeling defeated. I didn't know where else to turn. I didn't have a lot of money to just throw away on a new car, and the thought of not having my own transportation was terrifying. I could feel the lump in my throat as I turned and walked out. I was just about to get into my car when I heard his voice again, calling after me. "Maybe next time, don't waste my time, all right?" I didn't respond. I couldn't. What else could I say? I got into my car and drove off, trying not to let the tears sting my eyes. I couldn't believe how rude he had been. The next day, something strange happened. I was sitting at home, scrolling through job listings on my phone, when I saw an ad pop up for a new position at a car repair company. I had no intention of working in that field, but the ad caught my attention because the company was hiring for a management role. It was just a simple posting, "New CEO needed for a growing auto repair company." I felt a spark of curiosity. I clicked on it, and as I read through the details, something unexpected crossed my mind. What if I could take over that shop? The one where I'd been treated so badly. What if I could show him that I wasn't just some helpless woman with no knowledge of cars? Maybe it was a bit of a stretch, but I wasn't gonna let a mechanic belittle me again. I applied, just out of spite, even though I knew the chances of getting the job were slim. Hours later, my phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize, but I picked it up anyway. To my surprise, the voice on the other end was friendly, even enthusiastic. "Hi, is this Sarah?" "Yes, it is." "Great, this is the owner of the auto repair company you applied to. I'd like to offer you the CEO position. We've been looking for someone with a fresh perspective and leadership skills, and after reviewing your application, we think you're the right fit." I was speechless for a moment. I didn't even know what to say. "Wait, you're offering me the CEO position?" I asked, trying to make sure I heard it right. "That's right. We'll be sending you the contract and further details shortly. We've got big plans for the business, and we need someone who can take charge." I barely even processed what was happening. I didn't know how, but somehow I was going to become the boss of an auto repair shop. The next day, I walked into the shop. I felt a mix of excitement and nerves, knowing what was about to happen. I could already picture the look on that mechanic's face when he saw me, but I had to admit, I was also a little anxious. What if he didn't take me seriously? What if he didn't respect me just because I was a woman? When I stepped inside, he was there, working on a car like usual. I took a deep breath and walked toward him. "Excuse me," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I'm Sarah. I'm the new CEO of the company." He looked up at me, a smirk already forming on his face. "New CEO? Yeah, right. You don't look like a CEO." I could feel my heart racing, but I held my ground. "Actually, I am the CEO. I'm here to make some changes around here." He stared at me for a long moment, his expression shifting from amusement to confusion. "You've got to be kidding. You're not serious, are you?" "I'm very serious," I said, a smile forming on my lips despite the tension. And I'll be overseeing all of this from now on, including how you treat customers." He went silent for a few seconds. The realization started to hit him. I didn't say another word. I turned and walked past him, heading straight into the office. I could hear him mumbling to himself, probably still trying to figure out what just happened. I sat down at the desk and looked around the room. It was a strange feeling, knowing I was in charge now. But deep down, I knew I wasn't just doing this for the title. I was doing this to show that I was more than just a woman who could be easily dismissed. I was strong, I was capable, and I wasn't going to let anyone put me down again. The hours dragged on, and I could feel the tension building in the shop. I hadn't seen the mechanic come into the office yet, but I knew he had to be processing the shock of what happened. I tried to focus on the work ahead of me, organizing plans for the future of the company, but my thoughts kept drifting back to him, to that moment when I'd walked in and claimed my new role. Eventually, the mechanic appeared in the doorway of the office. He was standing there, arms crossed, his face a mixture of disbelief and annoyance. "So, you're really the new boss, huh?" he asked, his voice quieter than it had been earlier, but still carrying a sharp edge. I nodded. "I am." He didn't say anything at first, just stared at me, almost as if he was waiting for me to back down, to show any sign of weakness. But I wasn't gonna do that. I wasn't here to play games. "So what now? You gonna tell me how to fix cars?" he scoffed. "You're not even qualified." I could feel the heat rising in my chest. I had known this conversation was coming, but hearing him say it, seeing the disrespect in his eyes, still stung. "No," I replied, my voice calm, though I could feel the tension in the air. "I'm not here to tell you how to fix cars, but I am here to make sure this place runs the way it should. And that means treating customers with respect. That means making sure we're all working together, not tearing each other down." His eyes narrowed. "You think I'm gonna take orders from you? Just because you got a title?" I stood up, not backing down an inch. "I don't expect you to take orders from me just because of a title. But I do expect you to show up, do your job, and treat people with decency. That's not asking too much." He was quiet for a moment, and I could see the gears turning in his head. Maybe he was starting to understand, or maybe he was just angry. Either way, I wasn't going to let this go. "I don't know what you think you're going to change here," he muttered. "This place is fine the way it is." I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm despite the frustration bubbling up inside me. "It's not fine. You know it, I know it, and we're not going to get anywhere if we don't work together. You can either be a part of the solution, or you can keep going down the same path. It's your choice." For a long moment, he said nothing. Then he finally sighed, the defiance in his posture softening just a little. "Fine," he muttered, turning to walk away. "But don't think I'll just forget how you treated me yesterday." I wasn't sure if he was ready to let go of his pride, but at least I'd planted the seed. I wasn't looking for an apology. I just wanted him to understand that I wasn't the same woman who had walked into his shop the day before, desperate and humiliated, and I wasn't going to back down, no matter how much he pushed. As the day went on, the atmosphere in the shop slowly started to shift. The other mechanics began to take note of my presence, their initial hesitation turning into curiosity. I didn't expect them to respect me right away, but I was patient. I knew this wasn't going to be an easy change. But I wasn't giving up. As the day wound down, the mechanic who had been so rude to me earlier came to me again, this time with a more neutral expression. I didn't realize how bad things were around here," he admitted quietly. "I've been here for years, and I guess I got used to the way things were. But maybe you're right." I looked at him, not saying anything at first. "I'm just asking for respect," I said finally. "That's all." He nodded slowly, his gaze finally meeting mine, a sense of understanding beginning to settle between us. "I'll do better, for what it's worth. I'm sorry about yesterday." I could feel the weight lift off my shoulders as the tension began to fade. It wasn't a full resolution, but it was a start. And sometimes that's all you need, just a start. "I appreciate that," I said softly. "Let's work together to make this place better. For all of us." And just like that, the first step toward change had been taken. The days that followed were a mix of ups and downs. The atmosphere in the shop had definitely shifted since I took over, but change wasn't something that happened overnight. I could feel the tension still lingering, especially with the mechanics who had been there for years. They weren't used to a woman being in charge, let alone someone they thought was inexperienced. But I wasn't giving up. Not this time. I spent the next few days learning everything I could about the business. I made it a point to listen, to understand the challenges they faced, and to earn their trust. I wasn't there to make demands or force anyone to do things my way. I was there to build something better, together. But I knew the real test was going to come when the first big decision came up. One afternoon, a customer walked in with a big issue. His car had been in a minor accident, and he wanted a full repair. The mechanics took a quick look, and it seemed like a routine fix. But the mechanic who had been the most resistant to me, the one I'd clashed with the day I started, pulled me aside. "This guy's car's not worth repairing," he said quietly, glancing over at the customer. "It'd cost more to fix than it would to buy a new one." I felt a knot in my stomach. I didn't know how much the customer had invested in this car, or how important it was to him, but I knew we had to give him an honest answer, not just tell him to give up. I looked at the mechanic. "What do you suggest we do then?" He shrugged. "Tell him it's too much money. Send him to the dealership to get a new car." I wasn't sure what to do. Part of me knew that the mechanic might be right. It could cost more than the car was worth. But I also remembered how I had felt when I was dismissed, how the mechanic had told me my car wasn't worth fixing and didn't even give me the chance to make my own decision. I turned to the customer. He was sitting in the waiting area, looking tired and frustrated, like he was already expecting bad news. I walked over to him and sat down. "I'm Sarah," I said, smiling to ease the tension. "I'm the new CEO here. Let me take a look at your car myself and make sure we're giving you the best advice." The customer looked up at me, surprised but appreciative. "You do that?" "Of course," I said. "We're here to help. Let's see what we can do for you." I went back to the shop floor and stood beside the mechanic. He looked at me with raised eyebrows, clearly not sure where I was going with this. I took a deep breath, then looked at the car again. It wasn't in great shape, but it wasn't beyond repair either. It was just going to take more time and effort than the mechanic had wanted to put in. After a few minutes of inspecting it, I turned to him. "I think it's worth repairing. But I want us to give the customer an honest estimate, so he can make the decision." The mechanic frowned, clearly annoyed that I was pushing against what he thought was the easier way out. "You sure about this?" I nodded firmly. "Yes. And I'll make sure we stay within his budget. If it gets too expensive, we'll talk to him again. But we're not just going to tell him it's not worth it." There was a long pause before he sighed and went back to work. The next hour was tense as we worked on the car. I made sure to check in with the customer, keeping him updated on the progress and being transparent about what was going on. It wasn't easy, but I could see the appreciation in his eyes every time I spoke to him. It was a small thing, but it made a huge difference. By the end of the day, we had the car fixed. It wasn't perfect, but it was functional, and the customer was grateful. As he paid for the service, he smiled at me and said, "Thanks for being so patient. I wasn't expecting this kind of treatment. I'll definitely be coming back." I watched him leave the shop, and for the first time since I'd taken over, I felt a real sense of pride. We had done the right thing, and I had proved that I wasn't just there for the title. I was there to make a difference. As the mechanic who had doubted me walked over, I could see a shift in his demeanor. He didn't say anything at first, but I could tell he was thinking about what had happened. "You were right," he finally said, his tone softer than it had been before. "That guy really appreciated what you did. I guess I've been too focused on the easy way out. Maybe it's time for a change." I smiled, the tension easing between us. It's never too late for that. And just like that, things began to feel a little more right. The shop wasn't perfect, and I wasn't perfect, but we were getting there, one step at a time. It had been a few weeks since I took over as CEO, and things were slowly starting to settle into place. The mechanics were beginning to warm up to me, and I had made it a point to address any concerns they had. I could feel the change, even if it was small. Respect was starting to build where there had once been doubt. But I knew the real test was coming. One afternoon, I received a call from a major client. The company owned a fleet of delivery trucks, and their vehicles needed constant maintenance. They had been using another shop for years, but their most recent experience had left them dissatisfied. They were looking for a new place to handle all of their fleet's repairs. This could be huge for us. If we could land the contract, it would not only give us steady work, but it would also give us the credibility we needed to really grow. I was excited, but also nervous. I wasn't sure if we were ready for such a big account, especially given the rocky start we'd had, but I didn't want to let the opportunity slip through our fingers. I decided to take the meeting myself, even though I was well aware of how much was riding on it. I arrived at the company's office and was greeted by the head of operations, a no-nonsense man in his mid-40s named Greg. He looked me up and down with a skeptical eye as I introduced myself. "You're the new CEO, huh?" he asked, his tone making it clear he wasn't sure what to think of a young woman running an auto repair shop. "That's right," I said, doing my best to keep my confidence up, despite the wave of self-doubt that had suddenly hit me. "And I'd love to talk to you about how we can help your fleet." Greg didn't waste any time. "Let's get to the point. We've been dealing with delays and poor communication at our current shop. We need someone who can guarantee quick turnaround times and excellent service. I'm not interested in excuses." I nodded, trying not to let the pressure get to me. "I understand. We've been focusing on improving our customer service, making sure that every job is done right the first time. And I promise you, we'll prioritize your fleet, ensuring that your vehicles are back on the road as soon as possible." He leaned back in his chair, still sizing me up. "That's what the last shop said too, but we're still dealing with late repairs, trucks sitting in the shop for weeks. Why should I believe you?" It was a tough question, and for a moment I didn't know how to answer. But then, I thought back to how I had fought to turn things around in our shop. I had stood up to the mechanics who didn't believe in me. I had fought for the customers who deserved better treatment, and I had pushed for change when no one else would. If I could turn around a small shop like ours, why couldn't I do the same for this client? "I get it," I said, my voice steady now. "But here's the difference. I'm not going to tell you what you want to hear. I'm going to make sure we deliver, and I'll be hands-on, overseeing everything myself. No delays, no excuses." Greg looked at me for a long moment, his eyes narrowed. I wasn't sure if he was convinced, but he didn't walk away. After a few seconds, he spoke again. "All right," he said, leaning forward. "You've got one shot. I'll give you 2 of our trucks. If you can prove that you can get them in and out without any issues, I'll consider bringing you on for the rest of the fleet. But if you fail—" "I understand," I said, my heart pounding. "We won't fail." As I left the meeting, I felt a mix of relief and fear. It was a big chance, and we had to prove ourselves now. I knew that if we couldn't deliver, we'd lose everything. But if we succeeded, well, this could be the break we needed. Back at the shop, I gathered the team together. The mood was serious, but I could see a spark of determination in everyone's eyes. They knew how important this was, and they weren't going to let me down. "We've got 2 trucks coming in," I told them, my voice steady. "We're going to give them the best service we've ever given. We're not just fixing cars today, we're proving ourselves. We can't afford to mess this up." The team nodded, and I could feel the shift in energy. Everyone was on board. It wasn't just about fixing trucks, it was about proving that we could handle this kind of work. I stayed on the shop floor the entire time, making sure everything was done to perfection, double-checking every repair, and communicating constantly with the client. The trucks were in and out faster than I had expected, and I could see the difference in the team's work ethic. We weren't just getting the job done, we were going above and beyond. By the end of the day, I knew we had done everything right. The next morning, I received a call from Greg. "I'll admit, I was skeptical," he said, his voice more friendly now. "But you did it. You got the trucks back on the road in record time. We're bringing the rest of the fleet to you. I'll have the paperwork sent over." I felt a wave of relief wash over me, followed by an overwhelming sense of pride. We had done it. We had proven ourselves, and we had earned their trust. It wasn't just a victory for the shop. It was a victory for everything we had worked for. When I hung up the phone, I turned to the team. "We did it," I said, a smile spreading across my face. "We've got the contract." There was a cheer in the shop, and for the first time since I had walked in as the new CEO, I felt like I truly belonged. This was just the beginning. The contract with the fleet was a huge win, but with success came new challenges. Now that the shop had secured a major client, the pressure to maintain high standards was higher than ever. Every detail had to be perfect, every repair had to be on time, and every interaction with customers had to be flawless. I knew we couldn't afford to drop the ball. In the first few weeks after we landed the contract, everything seemed to be going well. We were meeting our deadlines, keeping the fleet's trucks in good shape, and our reputation was starting to grow. But the bigger the company got, the more problems seemed to surface. A few weeks in, we faced our first real test of leadership. One morning I received an urgent call from Greg. There had been an issue with one of the trucks we had repaired, something that hadn't been caught during the inspection, and now the truck was back in the shop with a major breakdown. Greg was upset, and I could hear the frustration in his voice. "Sarah, this is the second time one of your repairs has failed," he said sharply. "I don't need to tell you how much this is costing us. If you can't get your team in order, we'll have to find another shop." I felt a wave of panic rise in my chest, but I pushed it down. I knew I couldn't let this affect my judgment. I needed to fix this, not just for the client, but for my team, for everything we had worked so hard to build. "Greg, I hear you," I said calmly. "We're going to take care of this. I'll personally oversee the repairs, and we'll make sure this doesn't happen again. Just give us one more chance." There was a long pause on the other end before Greg spoke again. "All right, I'll give you one more shot, but if we have another issue, we'll be done." I hung up, my mind racing. This was bad. We had to fix the truck, and we had to fix the root of the problem, whatever it was, before it spiraled out of control. I called an emergency meeting with the team, gathering everyone in the back office. The mechanic who'd been with me from the start, the one who had been skeptical of my leadership at first, looked worried. "We can't afford any more mistakes," I said, my voice firm. "We've got to figure out what went wrong, and we've got to fix it. I'm not here to point fingers, but I need everyone on the same page. We're not going to let this contract slip through our fingers." The room was quiet, the weight of the situation hanging over us. But then the mechanic who had been resistant to me all along spoke up. "You know, Sarah," he said quietly, "we've been running at full capacity. We've got too many cars in here, and we're rushing through the repairs to keep up. Maybe that's why some things are slipping through the cracks." I paused for a moment, processing his words. It made sense. We had been so focused on taking on as many jobs as possible to prove ourselves that we had stretched ourselves thin. "You're right," I said, feeling a sense of clarity. "We can't sacrifice quality for quantity. We're going to slow down, take a step back, and make sure we're doing things right. No more rushing." We all agreed, and I immediately set up a plan to reorganize the workflow. We would prioritize quality over speed, and if that meant taking on fewer jobs, then so be it. Our reputation was on the line, and I wasn't going to let it crumble under the pressure of trying to do too much. Over the next few days, the team worked tirelessly to fix the issue with the truck. We took it apart, examined every detail, and made sure everything was in perfect working order before it went back to the client. It wasn't an easy fix, but we got it done. When Greg returned to pick up the truck, I felt the tension in my chest tighten again, but when he inspected the work, his demeanor softened. "This is what I expected," he said, nodding approvingly. "Good work. I'll admit I wasn't sure you could turn things around, but it looks like you've got it under control. We're sticking with you." I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. It was a relief, but it was also a reminder of how fragile our position was. We had narrowly avoided disaster, but we had also proven that we could recover from mistakes. That was what leadership was about, being able to adapt, learn, and fix things when they went wrong. As the weeks passed, we kept up the steady pace. The shop started to feel like a real well-oiled machine. The team worked more efficiently, and the clients we served began to take notice of the quality we were delivering. But there was one thing I still hadn't figured out. I had succeeded in winning their respect, in showing the team that I was capable, but I had yet to show myself that I could truly lead in the way I wanted to. Being a leader wasn't just about fixing problems and making the right calls. It was about inspiring those around you, helping them see the bigger picture, and giving them the confidence to believe in themselves. It wasn't enough to just run a business. I had to build a team, a family, and for that, I knew I had to keep growing, keep learning, and keep pushing myself further than I ever thought possible. One evening, as the shop was closing for the day, the mechanic who had doubted me the most pulled me aside. He looked different now, more relaxed, more confident. There was still respect in his eyes, but it wasn't just because of my title. "I've been thinking a lot about what you said when you first came in," he said, his voice quieter than usual. "About respect, about working together." I raised an eyebrow, unsure of where he was going with this. "I used to think you didn't know what you were doing," he continued, "but I've seen you work. You've got something. You've turned this place around, and it's not just the repairs. It's the way you've made us believe in ourselves again." His words hit me harder than I expected. It wasn't just about the contract, the customers, or the money. It was about the people who had chosen to stay, to trust in me, to work hard because they believed in the vision I had for the shop. "I've learned a lot from you," he said with a small smile. "And I'm proud to be a part of this team." And just like that, I realized something. This wasn't just my story anymore. It was ours. I looked at him and smiled back, feeling a sense of accomplishment that went beyond anything I had imagined when I first walked into that shop. "We're all in this together," I said, my voice full of warmth and pride. "And we're just getting started." Thanks so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the story and found something meaningful in it. If you did, please take a moment to like, comment, and share. It helps so much in spreading the love. And if you're not already subscribed, don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss any future stories. Your support means everything to me and keeps me going. I'd love to hear your thoughts, so drop a comment below. Until next time, take care, and keep believing in the power of change.